In this video, we're going to take a look at these ribbed vases, see how we can make that in FreeCAD. I've been seeing a bunch of these out there and just wondered how we do that in FreeCAD, so I thought I'd give it a go, and I think I have a solution, something that will make this type of ribbed vase that you can 3D print. And it doesn't look too complicated actually. The way I've done it, it's a bit of a hack, but it works, and I think it will end up being something that you can use for different effects. So let's give it a go. First, let's go over our version of FreeCAD. So I'm using 0.21.2, which as far as I know is still the latest release. I haven't downloaded one lately, but I will go and have a quick look before I finish this video. So I confirm that 21.2 is still the latest download of the official release. Of course, you can download the dev version, and that's got some good stuff in it apparently, but I haven't downloaded it. I've been using that one because I wanted you guys to be able to use the same as me without having to go to the dev version. All right, let's get started. As usual, what I would normally do is run my startup macro, and that would give me a new file and a new part with a new body and start a sketch. But because some people don't have that macro, I'm going to do it manually. So we're going to start a new file, then we're going to create a new body, and then we're going to, a new part, and then we're going to create a new body inside that part. Then we're going to create a sketch, and just because I want to do a vase that's sitting on the XY plane, I'm going to do it on the XZ plane. Now, one thing to bear in mind, if you look over here, is to make sure that you have, you're not zoomed in so far that you're working in nanometers. So this is a good amount of zoom, so that's pretty good. So we're going to go from there. Now, the first thing we want to do is we're going to do a revolve for the basic shape of a vase. So I'm just going to shift that over there. So I'm going to create it with a polyline. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off this point here. I'm going to come out, let's say 30-ish millimeters. And then I'm going to go up. I'm going to have just a little bit of an angle there. And then with the polyline, if you hit M, it will change the way the polyline works, and I can turn it to a radius like that just by hitting M. I'm going to go out to here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go M again. I'm going to bring it back this way a little bit, and then I think I'm going to go one more M and just take it out. Just move down a little bit. I'm just going to take it out like that. I think that's a good vase shape. Now I'm going to hit M again. I want to go back to the regular polyline, so I can hit back to the middle. I'm going to make it vertical, and I'm going to go back there, drop down here, touch with that, close that, and just so I can see what it looks like, I'm going to close my sketch now before I put any dimensions on there, and I'm going to make a revolve. I'm just going to have a look at my vase shape. Is that what I want? I think that's not bad, so we're going to say OK. I'm going to go back into my sketch that's inside the revolution now. It's the same sketch, and now we're going to put some dimensions on here so that we can lock the vase down a little bit. So to dimension it, I'm just going to, this one here is obviously going to be a dimension. So we'll do that. And I'm going to round that to 30 while I'm here. So that's the base part. And then I think I'm going to do an angle for this piece here because I like that being an angle. So I'm going to take that line and that line, and we give that an angle. I'll call it 140 degrees, just rounding up. And we want a height for that angle, so we're going to go from there to there. Give that a height. We'll call that 3 millimeters. And there we have the first two parts of our line are already constrained. Now we're going to go with some radii. That one's going to be 55. Again, just to round it up. And then this one we're going to do a radius. We'll do that as 64. And my final radius is going to be here. We'll do that as 6. And then this one is going to be a dimension out to here. And I think I'm going to make that a little smaller. So I'm going to make it 28. There we go. I like that a bit better. And now we need to just lock our radii in a little bit. We're going to do the height of this. Will be one way we can lock it up. So that's 100. We'll just make that 105. And I'll bring that over there. So you can see as we are constraining it, these lines are already tight. Now we got to constrain this radius and this radius. So one way we can do that. So what we want to do next is we're going to go from there and tell it where these two actually blend. So we'll give that a height. And when we do that, it locks everything up because everything is tangential. So that's good. We have a fully constrained sketch. We can close that. This is our vase. And obviously, if we wanted to, we can change parameters there. No problem at all. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this body and I'm going to rename it. And I'm just going to call it vase, just so we know that's the actual vase. Then I'm going to go to my part and I'm going to create a new body. And this body I'm going to call outer vase. So we're going to call it outer vase. And what are we going to do here? We're going to take this sketch that's in this revolution and we are going to copy it. And we don't need the XZ plane. We're just going to take the sketch. We'll say OK. Then this is our active body, so we're going to paste into here. And then, as always with FreeCAD, you have to just move it back in so that the sketch is now in here. And that will give us that same sketch. Now, one thing I want to make sure is with this revolution, everything is good. So I'm going to take this revolution and I am going, this sketch, and I'm going to create a revolution with that sketch. And I'm going to say OK. And now I have two revolutions on top of each other. So why do I want that? Let's turn off our outer vase. Let's make our vase our active body. Then I'm going to click on this face here and I'm going to say thickness. And I'm going to make it 3 millimeters in thickness, just so we got a bit of body there. And then I'm going to say this. One thing I wanted to show you guys. So when you want to edit one of these things, you can go, obviously I can go down here and edit it. You double click it and it goes into this translation view and it allows you to move it around. I don't want to do that. So if you right click it and then say click edit thickness, that allows you to do the things you want to do. Now in this case, I want to make my thickness inwards. So there's my vase and it is now 3 millimeters from that revolution. That's this outside shape. 3 millimeters in, I have my vase shape inside. So I'll say OK to that one. Now with this outer vase, so I'm going to turn off the inside vase, turn back on my outer vase, double click it to make it the active body. Then I'm going to click this face and say thickness, and it's going to be 3, actually I'm going to make it 5 millimeters. not 55 millimeters, I'm gonna make it 5 millimeters, but I'm gonna leave it outwards. So it's gonna be a 5 millimeter outward vase. So now I have a outside thickness of that vase. The original revolution is here, and there's a thickness that goes to the outside of the vase. So they have the same sketch, the same revolution. One is outside and one is inside on my thickness. So there you can see the inside vase. Here, if I highlight it, you can see the inside vase and then a thickness around it. So that is where we are going to put our ribs. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Okay, now what we're going to do is we are going to create one more body. And this time we're going to create a sketch, and that sketch is going to be in the XZ plane again. And we are going to look at the sectional view, and we are going to create the rib that we want in this body. So I'm going to do it, I'm just going to actually do it with another polyline. And one thing I've noticed is if you come all the way to the top here, it'll give you a rib, but it'll stick way out at the top, and I don't particularly like that. So I'm going to start somewhere down here, and the idea is you come here, go across here, down here, and it's up to you what you want that rib to look like. So yeah, it's whatever you intend it to be. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go over to here. I'm not going to go too far over. I think I'm going to go here, and then another one here, and then I'm going to bring it down here, and I'm probably going to end right there because I don't want it to go all the way into the bottom. And now what I could have done is used the M and made that radius, or I can equally do it with this radius. I'm just going to pick there and pick there to make a radius, pick there and pick there to make a radius. So there we have a rib, and of course we can mess with this rib to see if it's something that we like, but we need it to have a thickness. So what we're going to do is we are going to select all of this, just pull a bounding box, and we're going to do a copy. So we're going to say copy, and I don't want to clone it, I'm just going to copy it. And so we're going to say copy, and then it asks us where do you want that copy to sit, and because it's coming from here, I'm going to take it over here about 5 millimeters thick, I think. And there's my second line. And now all I need to do is take another line, so I'm just going to hit a little line there, take it from those 2 points, and close that. And now with this body, and I'm going to change this body's name, I'm going to call it rib, because that's what it is. I'm going to take this sketch, and I'm going to pad it. And then when I pad it, I'm going to look down the top view. So when I pad it, I want to pad all the way through until it comes all the way out the other side. Now if we look at this way, you can see our rib is sticking all the way through our vase. And I didn't fully constrain this rib yet, but I'm going to show you the technique. You can work on the constraints. What you're probably going to want to do is to modify it and make it fit the way you want it to fit. But next thing we're going to do is we are going to do a boolean between the outer vase and the rib. And we're going to make just one rib that is in the form of our vase. To do that, we're going to switch from part design. We're going to go over to part, because the boolean in part is a little easier to work with. So we're going to take the rib, And we're going to take the outer vase. I'm holding Control down to select the outer vase, and I click on this Boolean command. And then what I want to do is I want to go with the intersection. And it's going to be the rib and the outer vase, and I'm going to apply that. And now I have a rib that sits on the vase perfectly. And you can see, if you look at the top here, you can see that my rib is going to stick out a little bit strange there. So we can affect that, we can change that by changing the rib. So I'm going to close that. We now have a rib. Now we need to have an array of ribs that run all the way around this vase. So I'm going to show you how to do that. To create an array of ribs, sounds like a rack of ribs. To create an array of ribs, what we're going to do is we're going in the draft workbench. So we're going to go in the draft workbench. We're going to select this common. And we're going to go to this array function over here, and we're going to create a polar array. And now our polar array, we can tell it how many pieces we want. First thing we want to do is reset the point to 0. And then we're going to create how many arrays, or how many elements in the array we want. And I think 15 or 16 is probably going to be enough. And I'm going to say OK. And there's my ribs all the way around my vase. And you can see they still have that weird top part, so I will change that, but it's not as important. One thing that people ask me a lot is how you turn off this grid. Anytime you go into the draft workbench, it turns on the grid. It's simple, you just click this guy and it turns it off. And get rid of it. So that's how you create the array of ribs around your vase. Okay, so before we join these together, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the array, or actually into the original rib. We're going to go into that sketch, and we're going to lock this down. So I'm going to move these parts here a little bit so that we get a little bit better. And you'll notice that it's a little bit slow, and the reason for that is because we've already made an array with it. So every time we update something, it's literally updating the array. So what might be a smart move is if we go out and delete our array and redo our rib. So let's do that. I'm going to close this. I'm going to go to my array and delete the array. And then I'm going to delete my common. So I've taken us back to just a rib there. Then we can make these modifications. And it shouldn't be quite as arduous on my processor. Now, of course, I could be doing all this in a spreadsheet, and that would allow me to modify it once we get going. But again, the compute time is a little longer once you have built the array. So just be aware of that. Okay, so I went back and I fully constrained this sketch for the rib. So I fully constrained this sketch just to hold that rib in place. And I redid our array. And now I'm going to show you one thing. If you wanted to increase the number of ribs, so if I go down to my array here, you can see that my count is 16. That's not where you change it. A number of polar is where you're going to change it. If I go to 18 and then just tab away from there, you'll see now I have 18. I'm actually going to go more than that. Let's go to 20 just to see how it looks. And we're going to go to 24. Just for grins and giggles. So they're starting to get pretty dense. I'm going to make it 28 and see if they start overlapping. And there they're starting to look pretty close together. Now one thing we can do, if we want to change the way that these ribs blend in up here, we can go back to our outer vase into this sketch, and we can change these dimensions a little bit. So if I want to change this one, for instance, and make it 68 as a radius, you'll see what happens is it pushes this out a little bit, and then that's going to cut off a little bit of that top. So let's just take a look at that, and now you've got a little bit more of an angle as it's cutting in there. And I can also say, well, maybe 5 is too much for my thickness. So what if I make my thickness only 3? And then we can take a look and see how that looks. So now my ribs are not quite as pronounced. And you can modify it. I'm not going to go through all of that with you, but you can modify it to suit yourself. And then the final step in this is going to be to add these ribs, so add this array to the vase. And to do that, we go back into part, and we use another boolean. This time it's going to be the array and the vase. They're going to union. We're going to click apply, and then we have one union that is going to be our vase, including our ribs. And you can mess with the shape of the outside vase, you can mess with the rib shape, you can mess with everything. So I'm going to close that now. If you look at our fusion, that is the final vase shape. Now one thing I did notice with this is if I do things like I color this, I'm going to apply a random color. And then you can see how it colors. Actually, this one's not bad. So I did one earlier, and it made little squares in there, even though it didn't complain about doing the model. It actually did little strange squares. So there's a vase with ribs. You can completely print this. Everything is connected. You can modify it. You can modify the rib. You can modify the way they blend in. You can modify how far down this rib comes. I will tell you that if you go too far down with the rib, you are going to create a fusion or an interference with the bottom, and you'll end up with ribs in the bottom of the vase. So you just have to be careful with that. Other than that, it's kind of the technique. You can modify it exactly how you want to. You can bring those ribs all the way up to here. You can take the ribs all the way down the bottom. You can modify the shape and how the ribs turn out. And I would actually love to see the type of ribbed vase that you might come up with. Or if you use this technique to create something else, I'd love to see that too. The array technique is very powerful because that's not something you can do just in part design, because you can't have multiple bodies. But in draft, you can make that array so that it's actually a bunch of ribs in a circle that are not connected to each other. So that's pretty powerful. Again, it's a quick and dirty way to make a vase using the thickness, just doubling up on the thickness, and you end up with this type of vase. So if you have any questions, or if you have any thoughts, ideas, maybe ways to do this more efficiently or something else, feel free to let me know. I notice a lot of you will send me comments, and those comments are candid, and I appreciate that. I do appreciate comments. I am more than happy. I respond to all of the comments, primarily because I think if somebody takes the time to comment, it means that they're interested, and if you're interested, I'm certainly willing to help you any way that I can. So if you enjoyed the video, just give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, it's free to subscribe. Please go ahead and do so. I'm trying to build my subscriber base. It's coming along slowly, but we're getting there. And then, of course, if you do like the video, feel free to share it, because that's a way that other people can see it, and it helps me immensely. You can join our Patreon. I'd love to. I release all the files to my patrons. You can get them all for free. If you don't want to be a patron but you want the file, you can buy them from my shop. Or you can just become a member here on YouTube. And if you want to do that, I appreciate it. Or if you just want to buy me a coffee, I'm more than happy to accept that. It always goes to a beer, but I'll accept it as a coffee, and I'll convert it to a beer. So I appreciate it. Cheers. I will see you in the next one.